Goshu. I don't know, you might know him, he's a historian in Bucharest, and I think he's a very bright mind. And he said once the word cohesion by fear. And this point gave me to think, because there is a pattern. We know it. The old times, usually, if you have inner political problems, you start a war outside so you get some kind of cohesion. So this pattern is well used, and but fear using fear to get cohesion is something very old. It has been used for thousands of times through centuries, and fear has an intense effect because it's much stronger than morals, than knowledge. Fear affects our self-defense system, and so it's something we work with, and it has to do with the crisis of Europe these days, because when we're talking about social media, fear and these cliffhangers and clickbaitings always trigger our fear. It's the amygdala in our brain, which concentrates all our powers. If you have had a critical situation, perhaps in traffic, and you were listening to wonderful music, and suddenly a truck comes on your side, I swear you do not listen to your music. You're just listening to this moment. And there is another point. How long would this effect of almost having had an accident live within you? It comes back many times. So the impact in our minds of fear and of self-preservation is much stronger. And cohesion is another point. If you think about all the pyramid of needs of Maslow, yes? And it's just the bottom line is survival, and the top line might be fun or something. And there is another one of Glasser, I learned, and there is belonging. To belong to something is very important. Many years ago, when I was standing in a supermarket and we were in the queue waiting for the cashier, there was a father beating the son, not too much, but there was a kind of dispute. And you would say, well, the child goes away from the beating. No, they cling. This child clung to the leg of the father because the loss of cohesion would be, and of belonging, would be the worst thing we have. So we have this mechanism of fear, and we have the need of belonging. And this is a very strong power we have used for centuries. And there is, as I am German, and we Germans, we have one advantage over all the others, because we have committed the most of all errors you could commit in history. The biggest Holocaust and genocide, 2 world wars, so we were champions. And there is another thing, we have probably quite a lot of trauma. Some are perhaps comparable with Romanian or European ones, as we learned, because there was no German unity for a long time. There was German culture during centuries, yes, but there was no German state. The first German state, or the trial, was in, let me look it now, because I'm very bad at German history. 1848, the Parliament of Paulskirche, the Paul's Church, and later from 1871, it was perhaps the first emperor. And as we are nice neighbors, we directly had a war with the French. We won it this time. But with the Holocaust, we gave perhaps the most terrible statement of our concept of who belongs to us and who not. And this is, again, it's a strong power which is always used all these days. And we have different patterns, because you can be anti-Jewish, you can be anti-Arab, anti-Roma, and all these pogroms have happened all over Europe all the time. So there is a pattern behind, and it's you are against something or somebody because it gives you cohesion. And this mechanism has been used by those in power. It's nothing natural. Yes, there is something natural, because if something is strange and you do not know how people react. So the first thing is take care. But as soon as you meet and as you gather and as you have contact and as you have the same language, more or less, all these prejudices will evaporate, thank God, because finally we are all humans, and this is a great point. But and to think about when we are talking about integration later, because meeting, getting together, having a common language is important. But this thinking of what is the word? Just have to homogeneity is something we are talking about, and we talked about identities, and now the new maps of Gen Z, which are trying to create maps of homogeneity by sex, by sexual orientation, but by whatsoever, is a very strange thing, and it can be, and it's an instrument. Sadly, this instrument has been used by intellectuals too. I don't know if anybody of you knows Carl Schmitt. You know, you're an historian, you have, and lawyers usually know Carl Schmitt. Carl Schmitt was an intellectual and a law expert in the Republic of Weimar. And he wrote, and he was really bright-minded, and he wrote several books. And there was some kind of intellectual approach to homogeneity, and as well to who belongs to us and who not. The idea of the political is one of his smaller books, is the distinction, the idea is the distinction between friend or foe, first. The second book, not in order of appearance, is The Guardian of the Constitution, which is quite interesting because he analyzes the Weimar Constitution for the case of crisis. And therefore, his conclusion is everything is in the hands of the president of the Republic of Weimar. This argument has been slightly transformed afterwards, and it was the chancellor, you know all his name, it was Adolf Hitler. And he used this idea, this thinking, to create the Führer state from this. And Carl Schmitt as well, he had this Verfassungs, the constitutional theory, and therefore he talked about a nation should be homogeneous, which sounds very nice to create cohesion, but as well it's quite arbitrary, because if you look at Gen Z, all those who are queer, traditional, whatever, they are all Romanians or Germans or what. You can slice any society by a criterion you define, but finally you will never find homogeneity. And this is something we always have to think about when we are with people who try to tell us there is such as homogeneity. Carl Schmitt is interesting because finally he was so sharp-minded, even the left-wing extra-parliamentary opposition went to Plettenberg, where he dwelt afterwards, and to get some counsel from him, and even he developed a theory of guerrilla war. He's a strange guy. But to point out, there are intellectuals that use this. It's not only a dumb thing. They use instruments, and if we look nowadays at strategies of AfD, our right-wing guys, it's not only they address perhaps some gut feelings of people, but they have a strategy, and we have to keep it in mind. So, but we are now, I take you along the journey to Germany. What happens after this terrible thing, after homogeneity and the Holocaust and our war, when we wanted to Germanize all Europe? It didn't work out, thank God. Thanks to the Americans, thanks to the British. We were discussing about the bombarding of the British of Dresden and things, and well, we had to lose. It was necessary, but it's difficult. What happened afterwards? And now I'm trying to take you with me to the topic of migration and while it still works. There is an idea of a German identity behind we never could develop because there was no statal unity. So there was a very strong German thinking, perhaps, it's in a hypothesis, why we had to pronounce the German, being German without having a German state, because otherwise we would evaporate as a tribe. Something which happens as well, perhaps, please correct me, with Poland, because their Catholic identity was necessary when Prussia and Russia wiped out Poland for about 100 years. So the Catholicism creates some kind of cohesion, not by fear, but by identity, by belief. And but after this war, there happened something which possibly also has happened in Eastern European societies, and not only in Eastern European societies. We were traumatized. We were traumatized as perpetrators, and we were traumatized as victims. And it's interesting to know, even if you win a war, and killing people makes something with you. And having lived these things, if you maybe you have seen a movie or some documentation about the firestorms in Hamburg, when people were sucked into the flames because the wind was so strong, like the chimney effect. And if you see this, it makes something with you. And getting contact to these feelings is something which creates danger for your capability to live. Because the first thing is survival, and the second thing is identity. You might feel it if you have had something terrible, so you get some kind of dump for a while, and it takes a while, you recover your feelings. Germans were very difficult to address. We were very difficult to address our feelings, because there are three ways how to react on threat. Fight, we couldn't fight anymore. Flee, where to, and freeze, which is, you know it from animals as well. They do something, they just don't move anymore. And so we do, it's a natural thing. And as we were working, I would say, we were working as well. The German Wirtschaftswunder was one part good structure by the model of social market economy. But on the other hand, sometimes you do things because you cannot do the other things. We know this from the Freudian argument of sublimation. Did you hear this? If you cannot live your sexuality, then you give your energy in something else. This is the classical Freud stuff. Maybe and I would underline this, if you cannot live your emotionality, then you have to do something else. And this is what we German did. We were working like them all the time. We were eating all the time, because this was the only thing. It was the Fresswelle, the wave of devouring things. And we needed, as there were so many dead men, we needed foreign workers to have our Wirtschaftswunder, the marvel of economy. So we invited Turkish people, and not only Turkish people, but at that time from the Western world, Spanish, Italian, but Turkish people as well. We called them guest workers. Guest workers means we suppose they were guests, and a guest comes and he goes. What we did not think about is, if somebody comes for several years, the soul draws roots into the soil, and people do not go anymore, not necessarily. And as we were cut off from this empathy, we did not really connect with those people, and they did not connect with us. There was a special problem with the Turks, because they were even more different for their religious culture. Some of them, yes. The Western people who came fleeing from the dictatorship, the military dictatorship from Turkey, integrated very well, they learned. But the other part of Anatolia and behind, they were very low educated, and so they were just working, and they were doing their job, and they were there. And we did not talk about them as humans. They were just workers, and they were some kind of a bubble within our societies, we did not connect. And this is the problem we have again, and there was again us and them. I'm faster than my text. Lack of empathy, and again, now what we are living is that they use cultural differences to pronounce cohesion by fear. They say we are threatened by different cultures, which and we try to address this some way, because we do have some problems. If we are in some quarters of London, you have problems with some kind of non-integrated migration. Once I spent a night in Brixton, I said, I remember, and they told me, the neighbors were aches in bed. So there are some, but we have some kind of, it's 30 years ago or more. But we have some kind of trouble, yes, but we have another kind of trouble, because if these Muslims, to take one example, are not respected and they do not belong to anywhere, and this would be somewhere a topic too with Romania. So what do they need? They need belonging. But they are this kind of sandwich generation. They are no longer Turks, but not yet Germans. And there comes the role of fanatism again, because fanatism gives belonging. If you suddenly, you can say you're a radical, but you are part of a sect. Every kind of sect gives belonging. I belong to whatever. We saw it in the States as well. There were these guys that suddenly they killed themselves. But you have the Ku Klux Klan as well. And I've been working in Central America, and perhaps you have heard of maras, which are the street gangs. The standard life expectancy of a member of a street gang is 21 years. To become member of a street gang in Guatemala, you have to kill somebody without having a personal interest. A mother with a child or something. It's not for money. To become part of a mara as a woman, you have to give yourself to all the male members of the gang. And people do it. Why? Because it gives belonging. And there is a very strong force. And the next part is, and I'm coming a bit to Romania. If we talk about Georgescu, he did something, if you read what he said, the spirit of Romania comes from the waters of Carpathia, or some stuff like that. It was complete nonsense, but it gave belonging. And he said it in a way that people thought they were community, belonging. So it worked, next to astroturfing and something. He hit the nerve of a need of persons in a world where we are losing control. And that's why we are again with cohesion by fear, cohesion, and people who try to damage our cohesion with a strategy by social networks, by addressing the fears, and by addressing real feelings of persons. There is, and now I'm drifting away from a bit from my script. I think there is one common thing in all liberal democracies at this moment. The liberal democracy is based on the individual. And the sad thing, if you see individual by collective gives belonging. It's somewhat nice, but it obliges you to some kind of uniformity, which is, for the free part, is horrible. I would not like to be part of a collective. But there are others who need the structure, the grid of a collective. The distinction between somewheres and anywheres. It's as well how much you are trained to get along with change. And people in some regions of Romania are less trained than perhaps others in the center of Bucharest or of Berlin. So, and we tried in Germany to get something back to how to formulate something, some kind of belonging, even for migrants. And there's the long history, Bo. And let's talk, if you want to, about this fear of losing control, which is triggered individually by many factors and very individual factors, which is used by Donald Trump and Cambridge Analytica by the means of micro-targeting, if you remember. It's just addressing for each individual's this stuff. In Germany, we talked about German Leitkultur, and it was a trap. You understand the guiding culture, the German guiding culture, to create some kind of belonging in a way and to define what means integration, because they use the trigger of migration. If you go to Hungary, if you go to Poland, to Germany, to everywhere, they use this migration as a threat. There is one, perhaps a smaller one, but there is another point why we did not define what we want as Europeans, and this is will be perhaps my last point. But the German Leitkultur meant that there is some kind of Germanity. You have to adopt to be a German and to share our values. And even this was, do we need 2 barbecues for pork and for veal sausages, and could we eat Haribo gummy bears because they are made of cartilage of pork and whatever. It's a very strange thing, and it connected with a part of the Germans which still were in these belonging to the German culture, homogeneity stuff, which doesn't work in a modern world anymore. But there is one point that makes Europe unique, and as we are a traumatized continent, or not continent, but at least a traumatized slice of a continent, maybe we are not good altogether, and even Romanians perhaps are traumatized by Securitate, by the terror of terrorism, by not belonging anywhere in this world, because there is Big Daddy US, but on the other hand, there is European Union. And there are so many fears within our countries that we are not really able to define what we want and where we come from. At some points, I would say, provoking you a little bit, we have lost the contact to our feelings. And there are very deep feelings in Europe. What has made us strong as a continent or as a region? We are the best in killing ourselves. We are just masters of death during centuries. And there is one thing they could demonstrate on Netherlands soldiers when they have been in Afghanistan, which is called epigenetics. So you can switch on or off some kind of genes when you are traumatized. You know, this post-traumatic PSDA or something, how is it called? Yeah. And if you live it several times, maybe even there is some instinct which grows within Europeans. I don't know it. I wouldn't know even how to prove it, but it's an idea I would to throw into the pond and to think about it all together. But if we have war and we have migration and we have strong debates about burqa, and I have felt shocked in some way, and I didn't know why, when my stepson brought Turkish friends from school and their mother would not shake hands with me for religious motives. And I said, okay, cognitively, it's okay, different religion, do what you want, but my feelings were very different. And I was chewing on these feelings, and maybe, what means shaking your hands? Although it's perhaps a new thing, but in Catholic Church, after you shake hands, peace. And shaking hands means you do not have a weapon in it, which I find very interesting. You remember the salute of soldiers. What do they show? Their eyes. Because if you see the eyes, and that's why sunglasses sometimes are a bit strange, if you see the eyes, you see the emotions of a person some way. So if you do not see the emotions of a person, maybe in another cultural context, it's self-protection. In ours, it's possible threat. And that's why I think we should debate, and this is why our difficult history of homogeneity, cohesion by fear, and on the other hand, in a world which is globalized, and I enjoy it because if not, I would never have had the chance to meet you and talk to you because I would be in a German cage. But we have to talk what means to live, to dwell on a European soil with an ego message. And ego, and Germans, I will warn you, we usually are submissive. Listen to our communication, the published one. We are submissive, we are paying everything. And when we have stepped over our own borders and limits, the personal ones, suddenly we become moralistic. Jetzt ist over, now it's over, we said to the Greek. And so much European porcelain destroyed, trust destroyed with one moralistic thing. Suddenly the big German was the big idiot again. And we could not define our interests and we didn't sell them in a smooth manner. People from Denmark, from Sweden, who are perhaps less traumatized, they can define much better what we want, what they want, and what they do not want. What do we not want in Europe? I think I make a proposal, and to close. It's a continent of war by nations and by religion. And it's a continent of violence. So if somebody comes, there is the first part, and what we need is meeting each other, because if we do not do so, the prejudice is again the next of cohesion by fear and by homogeneity. So we need people to speak the language, one of the languages of your environment, and to connect. Second, we do not want to get any conflicts from outside imported to Germany, neither nationalistic ones nor religious ones, because too much blood in our earth. It's not just sand or earth. It's blood we live upon. So this is something I think we can give a strong message. So this is my invitation. Let's discuss openly what means integration and talk about what it means as fears for us. And sometimes we have to defend ourselves and even be tough in imposing our rules, but not in a stupid way, just, these migrants, but defining what means migration, because we need it as well in this society. And the next point is, how can we open our doors? And it's not something, and it's very difficult. We talked about this sometimes. In our countries, many times we expect other people to do the right thing. Finally, we have to do the right thing. We have to open our own doors. Even in our village, in our neighborhood, in our minds, it's quite strong. But really, we have to invite them and we have to get together. So that's perhaps the first points. And thank you for allowing me telling these thoughts, which are provisional. And I must give my thanks to John as a company, and to Pamela and to the Ratio family, because creating this great room space for encounter. And please, I'm happy to discuss with you. I hope I didn't talk too long, but I watched you and nobody, or almost nobody, was messing with the mobile phone. So I hope I held you captive, and let's discuss now. Thank you.
Thank you. you so much, Stefan. Very, very rich survey and giving us insights into why we are in a crisis, the sort of crisis we are in so many of our democracies at the moment. And it picks up on themes we've already had. So one of the points that Eric was making this morning is the way that modern mainstream politics has neglected so much about popular feeling. It's neglected the sense of belonging that you've outlined, and that's allowed for disruptive political forces to move into the vacuum. We heard from Slobodan all sorts of senses of what belonging means, and the fact that you can have multiple belonging. But of course, in a moment of crisis, the continuum he talked about, where you can have different identities, tends to get compressed into an absolute obsession with one identity. And of course, politicians can instrumentalise that, they can exploit that. And they're always bringing in historical senses of who are we. I'm very sensitive to this point myself at the moment, because at home in London, where I live, absolutely in central London, there's a huge march going on right now, which is being led by the far right. The person organising it, somebody called Tommy Robinson, is a convicted criminal who is reinventing himself as a Christian nationalist. And he's bringing together tens of thousands of people who are exactly, in a sense, responding to some of the problems that you've outlined. They have lacked a sense of belonging. And in this march, they will have that sense of belonging. There is a fear. When this similar march happened last autumn, and I went out and said he joined it, in the sense I wanted to find out why people were there. And I was talking to some of the marchers, and they were saying, it's never been worse. This country has been invaded by foreigners. We have to drive them out. That's why we're here. It was the fear. But the other thing I observed, which I would add to your point about belonging and fear and its instrumentalisation, this crowd was so happy. They were full of joy. They felt completely empowered coming together and sort of taking over the city. And I was reminded of that by Slobodan in his talk. If you remember, he talked about when the First World War began in 1914, there was dancing in the streets. There was such joy that this appalling act of violence was about to commence. There's a wonderful, wonderful description by Stefan Zweig, the great chronicler of his age, talking about what was happening in Vienna at that point. Absolute brilliant insight to that. So that sense of belonging is born of negative emotions, but it releases an intoxicating set of positive emotions. And you can see this through history. We can look back through the past and see where this works, where identities are compressed into a single exclusive identity, and where that gives an answer to this sense of belonging. So thank you very much.
There's another point, perhaps. There is Gustave Le Bon, The Psychology of Masses. And if people are together and they are on the same page in some way, and they are in a crowd, there is a strange feeling as well. I was on a demonstration pro-Ukraine, and we were 500 people walking through Stuttgart. And suddenly, because I'm terribly individualistic usually, and suddenly I was within the crowd, and it was some way, I had a feeling of empowerment, and on the other hand, it was very creepy. And if you're not sensible to the creepy part, it's just empowerment, and you can use it sometimes for a good thing, perhaps Metallica concerts, but you can't abuse it, and this is really a tough thing. There is Elias Canetti. I have started to read it about the masses. There is a book from him. It's quite new. It's from Russia, and so something more to think about. What means a mass and creating it? And if you have looked at German, I've been to Nuremberg to the stadium of the party convention of the NSDAP. And if you look at what happens in the masses, and they are uniformed, but they belong to something, this belonging thing is so important. It's a visceral power we need to address in some way as Democrats as well, because if we have a purpose, if it is for a better Romania, better Europe, whatever, and you define it in some way, so you can channelize these good powers to a direction. But as we are technocrats at this moment, it's dispersed, and it's perhaps too much intellectual. So we have been talking about populism, yeah, there is always a part of manipulation. The important part is behind what intentions are. Do you abuse or not? Are the persons to be trusted or not? And there again comes our gut feeling, but there's the point, and the needs. But
now I want to get everybody involved in discussion rather than just individual Q&A. So I'm going to ask you to do the table talk again for just under 10 minutes. And the same thing again, thinking about what was important in what we've heard, what you might question, and also bear in mind that so much of this, to understand the past, we have to understand the present. To understand the present, we have to understand the past. What is that conversation going on for us as history teachers? We've touched on this thing about mass mobilization. We've been talking about identity, about belonging. This runs through so much of the history that we're teaching in schools as well. So we can draw out some of those points, and then we'll come back and share and get some reactions again from Stefan. So table talk. And Stefan, if you'd like to sort of circulate among the tables.
I'm happy to do so.
Yeah.
I guess if you're a table,
We can be a table.
yes. Something positive, but it could go the other way.
Yeah, that's it. Why are we here?
This is back to drive. I remember immediately post 9/11, I felt actually because I saw this great uniting the country, but I also saw not just the regular flag, I started seeing battle flags and I think the UN flag on my because I just thought this is not going to end well. You know, so like I understand the initial response, but I could also see far enough to go. We are going to shift and transform into something before this is over.
And then Stefan will say.
especially for you, before social networks, everybody, each address of here, Alexander, selling the guns to Ukraine, and we are also providing
You don't need to do it in a way that addresses direct contact. Like I say, this is how we work. I could say, like a teacher could have said to me, not that easy, like just observe your own feelings when something like this occurs. Be aware this is happening before you can do something and you can see that as something which it should be abstract. This is what we're like. As human beings, under pressure.
Foundations of democracy. And this is very important setting for it's not just like learn from the past to correct the future. We really need to be aware of the actual behavior.
I was thinking I was curious about a much easier problem that maybe easier. I don't know if the feeling was interested me in the very beginning when terms started coming for work. And I was thinking, like, in Romania today, there's only been a small number of years that we have a lot of pollination. And currently, I don't think there's much resentment against that. They're quiet, they're not causing the issue. They said, not yet. The numbers are growing, which for me is a problem. But they're very much to themselves. Like, there's doing it, and there's be fine. But I'm curious, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, eventually, I don't know what
I've never been national debate.
not only national debate, I was even thinking about things like, okay, I'm fortunate, like probably all of us are, to know people all over the world. So if I think of a Palestinian, I think like, the first thing comes to mind, I don't know that I know my friends. I don't think about somebody growing up on the and so I think that the average person in Romania, even myself, there's nothing about Nepali culture, food, anything, and so there's no context between groups other than just okay, they didn't hear what they didn't, they're not stealing, so everything's okay. But what would be done, like, whether it's just performances, any sort of gathering people that at some point. If something does go wrong, if you have, I remember this with Americans, one of my friends was in Romania, and she said, part of the reason we have a lot of cultural stuff is if you have 5,000 soldiers here, eventually somebody is going to do it right, or somebody is going to do it right. You're going to have some bad. And she said, if we already have good relations and people know each other, then when some bad event does happen like that, it may be looked at as an isolated event as opposed to look at this whole group of people that we need to be afraid of.
Taking the part for the whole.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you connect everything loosely around this Yes, no, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
And people can look back and say, how do we get this right? Who okayed the national debate? Admitting more
And now, there it's just do you need to have the login?
Yeah. You can say a prayer.
Yeah, that's a like. Okay, everybody, let's come back into plenary. So we can all step out to the front again, and let's hear from some of the groups. Why don't we start? Just table.
Thank you for the lecture. It's quite interesting to hear a lot about the German case, and we do have a question about Germany today, because you talked about the sandwich generation.
Which generation?
Sandwich generation.
Yes.
For example, the Turkish minority, but not only to it.
Not only.
How do the second generation of migrants, so the ones that had their parents and grandparents coming to Germany, how do they relate to the German identity? Do they tend nowadays to be more open to it, or on the contrary, they try to protect more their family's identities?
Thank you for this question. It's very interesting because from time to time, these Germans have a Turkish passport too. And usually they do not vote in Germany, but they vote in Turkey. And what they vote is Erdogan, strongly, who addresses strongly these persons because he gives them some kind of belonging, although he doesn't give a damn, finally, but he wants the votes to stay in power. And the same thing is happening in Romania, in a way, with migrants. There are two classes of migrants. I want to invite you. We have a study on the thoughts and feelings of the diaspora of Romania, and it's very interesting because you have the free will diaspora who just went to other countries because there were better chances and they liked it and they could develop, and there were the others who were forced out of Romania because there was no living to earn in this country, and they suffer really, and they are very receptive to these nationalistic belonging thing, and that happens as well. You could not say the sandwich generation because if they are sandwich, they are neither, per definition, some way, they are nor German nor Turkish, and so they're radicalized and they are very strong pro-Erdogan. I can tell you, we had an intern. He should come for 1 year, and the grandfather was of the Grey Wolves, which is a fascist organization of Turkey, and he did not accept any kind of guidance. If you ask him to do something, I wanted to open the door of Adenauer Foundation in Stuttgart when I was there because I said we have to do it. He comes from Turkey, although he behaves a bit strange. Let's open the doors and let him mix because it's a chance for a personality. He did not accept the chance, but he rejected everything. And after 3 months, I had to kick him out of the office because he didn't do anything, and he was negative for our cohesion within the team. Finally, he ended up in an image of on Facebook after the Erdogan elections, the Turkish elections, and he was there with 3 guys, the Pasha type. Merz, I don't know if somebody heard this discussion of Friedrich Merz. He was a bit, I'm a member of CDU, so I have to be careful, but he was a bit complicated in addressing this topic, the Pasha thing, the male dominance stuff. But he was there, and we are so cool, we won with Erdogan. He wanted to be with the winners. And this is really difficult because how do we get them out of this? It's a mixture between forcing them and allowing them. But if they are already in this mindset, and this is talking about extremism, once you have fallen into the trap, into the hole, it's very, very difficult to get out. It's difficult. So sometimes we have to stand it. And I want to come to this, it's about communication. Merz in a talk show said, and we have to address the Pasha problem, just this generation. And he said, and they are terrorizing entire classrooms. He was right because there is this phenomenon, but what he did not do right was to get it into the context, because I don't know, 90% of everybody who has come to Germany behaves great, and they are a contribution for our GDP, for our culture. Everybody, German Döner stuff you get everywhere. So we Germans, we eat it all the time. We eat pizza. We have Spanish tapas. It's an enrichment, and it's only a very a small part of people who do not behave well, and that's why the better answer, in my opinion, would have been: look, 96% of everybody who has come here are great, and they and those who are not spoil the image of the others. So let's help them to get part of us, and do something, and do not tolerate everything. This would be a different message. It's complementary communication, what we need at this point, and not just dump populism.
Thank you very much. By the way, I'm keeping an eye on the clock, so I'm going to have to suggest your responses might have to be a little bit briefer. Sorry about that. The table at the back.
Just ask yes and no questions.
Well, we were discussing about the tolerance. For example, I have to say in Serbia, as we come from Serbia, and we had all year long very big protests. What we experience now is the lack of tolerance in Serbia, not among the ruling party, which is intolerant, as you know, and it's a dictatorship actually, but among we on the other side who are opposing this regime in Serbia, we are not tolerant toward any image of the other.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I was explaining them in schools where we work. We were so divided that there are no communication between two groups. Either you're on their side, either or you're on the other side. So it's very dangerous, but it is something inherited in us. It is something that's imposed on us by politicians in Serbia.
Yeah.
So that is something to be, and I was telling people like we were tolerant towards the regime, previous regime in Serbia, towards Milosevic party. We tried to make peace with them, and then this is the outcome. Being tolerant to dictatorship,
Yeah.
you get much worse dictatorship.
Yes, it's again perhaps defining what we want and what we do not want. Appeasement in German, it always goes wrong in some way. But there is another point. Why are all, not only Germany, but as well Eastern European communities are stressed? And there, I would say there are two speeds within us. There is a cognitive speed, which is instantly when something happens, and there is another part which is the emotional speed, which takes too much or very much time. If somebody dies, you know he's dead, you have seen the corpse, but you still the next day you want to call him if there's some butter left or something, and there's this missing and it cannot be. And to adapt to this world brings people to close up within them because they are stressed. We know it when we have guests. The first 3 days are okay because we do not oblige them to act like in a certain manner, but afterwards it becomes difficult. There's a Spanish saying, los muertos y los invitados a los 3 días apestan. The dead and the guests after 3 days they stink. And there's something about this feeling our own limitations in acceptance and in defining them, and and then back again in the emotional speed of it. Even if we adapt modernity, one of my children is non-binary. So in my brain I can accept this fast, perhaps, more or less. In my feeling it's much more difficult to address because I always use bad pronouns. And on the other hand, we have some quarrels because I do not adopt some of the political opinions of this child because I say it's too fast for the others. That's what's happening in the European Union. We are too modern sometimes for some more traditional societies. And if you accept that you're conservative and traditional, take your time, and wherever it goes, if you're allowed to choose your own way, and it gives you a grid in a moment of disorientation or of too speedy changes on so many levels. So my answer would be, let's talk about where we want to go together, and not are we right in this point or the other, because these struggles are always about definition of reality. And they always go wrong, even when you're married or in politics and something. Try to be short.
Thank you. And the table at the back. Yes, you.
We discussed like two different kind of topics. So you were present when we talked about it. So we were talking about what does integration actually means in European context, and we did put it against the inclusion versus integration, and in different European countries at what level it is actually possible, and how different types of migration lead to different types of inclusion and integration. So, for instance, we did mention a lot of people from Russia that came after the war came to Serbia, and because they are of course white, they look like everyone else, and they are, I have to say, of a better economical means, which means that they were able to buy apartments, open their cafes, so basically create this different culture that everyone can participate in. Everyone from Belgrade goes to their cafes and whatnot because it's a new thing, it's popular. But would we actually say that they integrated? Probably not, because all of them, rarely people speak our language now, or they, or if you go to the cafes, you would usually order Russian or some, or English. They would have someone from Serbia working there for serve the population. So we were talking about that, but also then we gave the example of other European countries, like, I don't know, France or Belgium, in which you would have for generations people from their ex-colonies, let's put it like that in more broader terms, or people that came from Turkey. I don't know, that's the biggest population in Belgium, that were workers that came to work during the Cold War period. So, and their children and children of their children, many of them would still live in these enclosed parts of the towns or parts of the country.
Which are exposed.
Yeah, of course, and that can create, even though they are included, they go to schools with other kids and everything, there's still no integration in real means, because it's really hard to get to the common ground of certain, I'm not gonna say values, it's a hard thing to say, but there is no there's no common ground from both.
It's a parallel life.
Yeah, it's also harder because those are people that came from the poorer, many of them came from like poorer, lower classes, let's say, economically. So it's also, there's that thing that makes it harder, or makes it creates more problems long term for those people to integrate, because if you don't have money, you can buy houses anywhere except where they put you, so to say. So there's also a lot of things to think about.
We tried to do something in Stuttgart, which was when they came, we reparted them all over the city, which was the Stuttgart model as well, and it works very well. There's perhaps one or two parts of the city, but finally we get along very good. There is no such as closed quarters of the city. Now it's a bit too late somewhere, because some errors create wounds that are not easy to be healed. But I would propose that we need a European discussion of what means living in Europe, and not only a negative one, but on the other hand, if you point at others, there are the three fingers again, and it means we have to invite them to us. Please come. What can we do? Why don't you feel okay? And I know it's difficult, and maybe it's very naive, but at least a discussion about what went wrong as well should be necessary, and it is an emotional thing, and sometimes begging pardon for at least your contribution of something that went wrong is the first step to resolve a conflict, and as saying as a German society, sorry guys and girls, we were so dumb, and it was not intentionally, but we hurt you. And there's something we have to do about this, and please come together and talk about it. And talk about parallel histories would be something, dialogues, making people appreciate it as well in this. Would be an attempt. Sorry.
At this stage.
We'll try to be short, especially since it is somehow answered. The question we wanted to ask. First of all, thank you. Wonderful presentation. A lot of ideas. So, would you agree on the fact that integration should be rethought in cultural terms, because we are speaking mostly of political, economic motive. Europe is a very tricky concept.
Yeah.
It's a mythological person coming from Asia.
Mhm.
As we have shown, Slobodan has made a very strong case. It's a geographical debate. It's also a cultural debate.
And I think
And there's also a dangerous thing. Are you familiar with the personal values questionnaire?
No.
No. You know, I'm very against it. A researcher at I think Haifa University or Tel Aviv developed a personal value questionnaire delivered to nations.
Mhm.
He never explained actually about it, and it developed such cultural maps
Mhm.
which are highly debatable, and are part. This personal values questionnaire is part of the Euro Observatory. Of the,
Europe?
of the social European Observatory. You might check, because it can become very traumatic. Because if you start looking at nations and making conceptual maps based on religion, in a moment in which
It's
people move
against
quite a lot,
the idea of homogeneity in some
exactly,
way.
it's very dangerous.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. Stefan, would you like to?
Yeah, well, but yes, I think, and this is a very, we can be thankful perhaps to Donald Trump, because we have to think about Europe. And he creates some kind of cohesion, and we have a military cohesion at this moment, and we have cohesion against something, but we need the next discussion, what are we for? What are we striving, where are we striving to? And a positive European identity as no wars, no conflicts for religion, and no conflicts for nations would be great. And even talking about minorities, it's against this, this topic of homogeneity. I'm not so sure if it's so good to protect minorities in some way, because you can define them as you want and better create a good electoral system. But this is just an idea. The debate is needed, even talking about what did not work fine and well in the past.
Thank you. This table.
Yes, we have a question. We want to thank you. It was so good explanation, and I find more examples, and I can use it in the classroom. Thank you for that. And we have the question: what more would civil society do to strengthen people's sense of belonging to democratic values? Do you know any examples of good practice?
Well, I've been working 18 and a half years in civic education, and so perhaps it's create forums to debate and to discuss about just what we said, and it's make people meet in any way you can find is the right thing to do, because when people meet and get together, their bubbles will break. This was the terrible thing about COVID, because they did not meet anymore, and the echo chambers went mad. The next point I would suggest as civil society is let's rethink how we position ourselves towards social networks. Because I said it in some talks, all we tried to do to maintain press democratic, all these mechanisms fail. Right to reply, responsible in the meaning of the press laws, press codex and press council, which is controlling. We have no access and no control of the algorithms. And so they make you read what they want instead of us reading from the newspaper what we want. So there are many things they try to manipulate us, and what they're trying to do at this moment, and this is my strong conviction, is they want to kill our cohesion, because it's the only thing which makes us strong against those China, a part of the US, and Russia. So there we have to get strong and think about that. What weakens us, on the other hand, and it's strengthening strengths and weakening weaknesses is the classical answer for this, and one weakness is our being so permissive with social networks which are not media. They are a tool against us, many of our, at least in this way how they work. And control of monopolies would be another part of the press.
Thank you very much. And
Also, I want to
sorry.
say something.
Please, sorry. Of course. Yeah.
I think, I don't know, a course about media with the students is a must for all of us, because, you know, they use different other things, TikTok and other, and they can be useful, I don't know.
Yeah.
Can be.
I can tell you something about this. Pamela knows we are trying to get into life a democratic influencers network. So maybe there is something to be spread. But as well, I was used to go to classes as well to talk to people. And so if you're more or less in Bucharest and if they speak English, invite me and I will come.
Yes, I will.
Okay, great, wonderful.
Physically or online in
Whatever you
Constanța,
want, yeah.
you are more.
Oh, I'm happy to go
welcome.
to Constanța.
And I think there's a connection to the next
Okay,
point.
so we first started briefly talking about both Serbia and the U.S. and authoritarian, movements that are going on there and the challenges of that, which I don't know how to solve. But then unfortunately, then I switched to something that I see in Romania right now, where a problem does not exist yet, but I see it existing in the future, which is we currently have many people from Sri Lanka and Nepal who are here as laborers, and they're very much themselves quiet. There's not animosity towards them at this point, as far as I see. But it made me think historically about Germany with Turks coming in. I don't know how the reaction was in the beginning. And so my thought is, how do we, which we've already discussed some here, how do we have relations where people actually know them as more than just somebody who brings the food to the door or is cleaning up the mall or whatever, so that years from now we actually are more integrated, know something of their culture, know people individually, bring these things together, because I don't see an effort for that happening right now. Maybe if it is, I don't know about it.
Well, it's difficult because Romania has still a lot of other problems, so they don't watch this part.
Yeah.
I don't know how many they are, but and there is another point which is, especially for Romania, the disparity between poor and rich is incredible in my opinion. And so there is a very small middle class, and if you live in Bucharest, you live upon the slave system of the Globo guys and others who work for very little, and this speaks very much for Romania, because even Romanians are by this, and they are still peaceful. If you go to Central America, you have maras, and you have real social criminality, and you have mafias who use this exactly. So it is explosive, and that's why I think a society needs some kind of minimum standards of living together, and not all business models are really human, and especially taxi drivers and global delivery services are really painful. If you live it, it's very comfortable. You use it, it's cheap, it's nice, but on the long run it creates problems, and we should talk about them. Unfortunately, at this time, Romania has so many other problems on a higher scale, talking about the government, so nobody thinks about this.
I also don't see children, I don't see many children, it seems mostly just relatively young people working, but without families. As far as I've seen, I don't know. So I don't even see integration in schools, because they're simply, either they're not existing or I don't know about it. So,
the legislation is framed like that, so it's an individual, mostly male-based recruitment, or women for caring for the elderly, but it's always on an individual basis. But you start, at least in Bucharest, you start seeing them socializing. If you go during weekends on the periphery of CPU, you can see the group, they're playing cricket.
I've seen this. I love this. I love seeing this.
Normal.
But I would love to see this, and also see some Romanians or people like me coming to watch that.
I would have been interested to be invited and just understand that one game, because it's very difficult.
But it's good, and if there are good initiatives, strengthen them, and this is civil society as well. Talk to them.
We're going to have to close there, which is a shame. That has been such a fruitful discussion. Thank you so much, Stefan.
It was really fun with you. Thank you, and for your audience. And I'll be here until Sunday all the day and until Monday morning. So everything you need and want, I'll be here with you, and I will be happy to do so. Thank you, John.
Good German.
Thank you, John.
Not at all, Stefan. Thank
you're
you
wonderful.
so much. Terrific. And now that's the end of the formal programme for today. There is an optional extra coming up, and that is there's a wonderfully talented documentary maker called Don Florescu, and he has made a documentary called The King's War, about King Michael during the Second World War. It's about 45 minutes, so for those who would like to see it, that's going to be projected now, and then dinner is going to be at 7 o'clock, and then tomorrow morning, breakfast from 8 to 10, and we'll be back in here at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to carry on the formal programme. And thank you everybody for all your contributions to today's debate. Thank you.